Hi guys, how's it going? As you probably guessed from the title of this video, we are going to be looking at 360 cameras that are good for taking photos. Or basically we're going to see which one is the best. We're going to compare them side by side. I've gone out and took some photos in various different places. We're going to have a look at the photos taken and see which one is the best or which one is the better value and just see the difference between them. So I've chosen 4 cameras to look at today. I've chosen the Ricoh Theta Z1, the Insta360 One X. We should have got them all out before I started doing that sentence. The Views XR, and finally the Xiaomi Media Mi Sphere. So let's go straight into it. Let's take a look at some photos shot with all 4 of these cameras side by side. I've kind of reframed them, made them into like a little video so we can have a look around and we'll see the quality or the difference in quality between them all. So first up we got the Ricoh Theta Z1, which I think probably is going to be the best out of all of these cameras. However, it's also the most expensive. As you can see, excellent dynamic range. The photo looks great. I've edited all of these in Lightroom, by the way, and done fairly similar editing techniques for all of them. I mean, they're all in the same location. So yeah, I did basically the same thing for every single one. Now onto the Mi Sphere, which is actually the cheapest and the oldest of all 4 of these cameras, and its age does kind of show. And finally the Views XR, which also does a pretty good job, but I would say not as good as the Theta Z1 or the One X. It's probably better than the Mi Sphere. Okay, so on to the next comparison, and this is shot with the Ricoh Theta Z1, and I think this is a really good photo. The sun was out, it was very, very bright, but the camera still deals with it really well. It's not overexposed. You can see all the details in the clouds and the grass. It's because of the 1-inch sensors that this camera has, it can deal with the direct light much better, and it just creates an overall better image, especially after you edit it. Now the same photo, same location, but with the One X, and it's much cheaper camera, but it still deals with the sun and the clouds and the difference between, you know, the light and the dark areas quite well. But I think you can agree that it's not quite as, you know, sharp and dynamic as with the Z1, the photo shot with that camera. Now it's because of the poor quality lenses. Now onto the Mi Sphere, and again we're seeing now with the cheaper cameras there's a line there. You can see the difference between the different lenses. It's not really blended it in very well, and the sun is very overexposed. Now, you can see here with the Views XR, there was some chromatic aberration, this kind of purple splodge, and it's very overexposed. It's probably done the worst here out of all the cameras. So yeah, I mean, it still looks good. There's still some good areas. The grass looks good, and it's very detailed, but yeah, it doesn't deal with the bright light very well. Now what I've done is taken all those photos, put them together in like the Tiny Planet mode so we can have a closer look, or you can just have a little longer look at each one. And yeah, pretty much you can just see the difference between them. The Z1 I think doing the best because it just, you know, deals with that direct sunlight really well. The clouds look great. Now we're going to take a closer look here at just the sunlight, where basically the sun was, to see how well each camera deals with that light. I think that's really important when choosing a camera, any camera really, but especially 360 cameras, because you're never going to be able to avoid the sun if you're shooting outside, so it's important that the camera can deal with it. So you can see here close up how each camera does deal with it. Okay, moving on to the final comparison using all 4 of these cameras, because I'm going to knock one out in a minute. This is a kind of darker area with surrounded by buildings, surrounded with lots of dark kind of shadows. So I wanted to see how well each camera dealt with shadows, like you can see in this building. So the Z1 doing, again, a really good job. That you can still see the details in the windows, in like the glass. You can see inside the building, and it deals with the difference between the very dark areas in the building and the sky as well. So yeah, doing a really good job, but obviously, again, very expensive camera. The One X doesn't deal with it quite as well. You can already see a difference between them. The darker areas are much darker. I really tried to do this in editing to get it to, you know, be even, but I just couldn't. This is the best I could get out of it. And the same again with the Mi Sphere. Darker areas are a bit of a struggle really for 360 cameras. It's very like noisy, shadowy, just you can't really get the details out of it. The Views XR did the worst by far, I think, because, well, I don't know, it's just very noisy. It's just super, super dark, and I really struggled to get any detail out of it. Even if I bumped down the shadows, it just made the whole thing very, very blurry, so I couldn't really do that. The sky looks good, but the rest of it is too dark. Now I'm going to knock out the Views XR from this comparison because it didn't perform quite as well as the Insta360 One X when it comes to photos. However, I will say that the Views XR is the only camera out of this comparison that comes with free desktop software that allows you to kind of edit your photos straight away, so you don't need to pay for anything like Lightroom. Obviously, this is an expensive program. This free program, the Views XR Studio, will allow you to color correct, change the position of your photo, change the blending, change the stitching. So that's the only camera out of this comparison that has free software that lets you do that, and I think that is something you need to consider if you're just shooting for Instagram. But yes, now we're going to move on to a different location, and we're going to look at just 3 cameras now, and I think this is the best location I found for shooting 360 photos. Really cool location in London, and the Z1 did such a good job here. This is probably one of my favourite photos I took of the day. Let's look at the 1X because it is much more affordable, and it's still doing a pretty good job. Slightly darker, slightly less detailed, slightly less, I don't know, that you can't really see the yellows of the sun as well, but it's still doing a really good job. For the price of the camera, it's a really, really good deal. Now onto the Mi Sphere, which also does a pretty good job. You know, for the price of the camera, it's even much cheaper than the 1X now. You can still get a pretty decent photo out of it, but it's just not going to be as dynamic. The light's not going to be as good, and you know, you're going to have limitations what you can do. Now, all of these cameras can shoot HDR photos automatically. Well, actually, the Mi Sphere can only really shoot the 3 exposures. You have to combine them together, but we're going to look at HDR now. Let's see what that looks like. Okay guys, so really it is basically down to the Insta360 One X and the Ricoh Theta Z1. I mean, these are the 2 options that I would recommend. I would go for the Z1 basically if you do actually want the best, the absolute best, and you're willing to spend the money. Probably you're going to be using it professionally in some way, but I think you can tell from these photos that it does create really awesome looking images if you go to the trouble of shooting DNG RAW and editing in Lightroom. And yeah, it just does a really, really amazing job. I'm going to be taking this on holiday with me over the next month. I'm going to be traveling around Europe. Where am I going? I'm going to Greece, I'm going to Germany, I'm going to Italy, Milan, France, Poland. Yeah, I'm going all over the place. So check out my Instagram. It's here somewhere, and I will be shooting a lot of photos with this. So check it out if you want to see some awesome 360 stuff from around Europe. But also the 1X, I will also be taking this on holiday with me, by the way, because it's awesome for video, but it's also pretty good for photos as well. We can take a look here at one more location where I shot with both these cameras, and I think the difference isn't huge. I mean, it is noticeable, but, you know, for the price of the camera, it does an amazing job, and you can get some really awesome photos out of it. But yeah guys, I guess that's it. I would recommend the Z1 for professional use for the absolute best. It is the best 360 camera for photos. That's the answer to the title of this video. But the 1X is going to be much more accessible for most people and much more affordable. So, I mean, if you're after something that is affordable, then this is the one I would recommend. But for the absolute best, it's the Z1 by far. Now, for every camera that I've mentioned, you can have access to manual controls, so you can adjust shutter speed, ISO, exposure, all that kind of stuff, similar to a DSLR. However, the Z1 is the only one where you can change the aperture, which means you have much more control over how much light goes into the lenses. Again, a much more professional feature and a much more professional camera than the others. Now, be sure to check out my Instagram. Like I said, there's so many photos on there shot with 360 cameras. You can have a look, and I usually say which one I shoot with. So yeah, subscribe if you want more stuff from these cameras, and I will see you next time. Bye!